Shri Ajay Kumar, IFS Joint Secretary, DPA-1, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. Shri Jaydev Galla, Honorable Member of Parliament and Managing Director, Amar Raja. Shri Jayesh Ranjan, Principal Secretary, Industries and Commerce and Information Technology, Government of Telangana. Warm welcome to Joel Reifman, US Consul General in Hyderabad. Warm welcome to ISB on your maiden visit. Shri Suresh Chukkapalli, Honorary Consul General of Republic of Korea, Telangana and Chairman Emeritus Phoenix Group. I request the Chair, Professor Nandu Nandkishore, Professor of Practice at Indian School of Business, to take. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon all. The good news is we are the only panel standing between you and lunch. And lunch is going to continue till 2:30. So we'll try and make an efficient job of it, so we have, all of us, time for lunch. Let me quickly introduce to you the panel, and not necessarily in order. There's Ajay Kumar at the far end. He is Indian Foreign Service, Joint Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. There's Jaydev Galla, right here, the Honorable Member of Parliament and Managing Director for Amara Raja, the biggest producer of batteries in India. We have Jayesh Ranjan, next to Ajay. He's also IAS, the Principal Secretary, Industries and Commerce and Information Technology, Government of Telangana. There's Joel Reifman, US Consul General in Hyderabad. And next to me, there's Suresh Chukkapalli, Honorable Consul General of Korea in Telangana, and Chairman Emeritus for the Phoenix Group. So with that, we get started. It's a big topic we're going to talk about today, negotiating new frameworks for Industry 4.0 and Society 5.0. When I saw this topic, I got so intimidated, I had to Google what Industry 4.0 meant. And I discovered that apparently Industry 1.0, the first industrial revolution, was all to do with steam and coal. Industry 2.0 was the big revolution caused by electricity. And believe it or not, in the early days of electricity, most companies, and there were companies and listed companies in those days in New York and London, the big financial centers, most of them had a vice president of electricity. For those of you who are planning to have vice presidents of digital transformation, you might want to think about that a bit. Industry 3.0 was the technology, internet, and data-based revolution. And Industry 4.0 is the one that is growing out of 3.0, which is the one led by artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things and so on. So it's a big topic and a lot of challenges which we will talk about today. What's complicating life is not just the Society 5.0, which I haven't found a definition for, but I presume is following the industrial revolutions. But also, very realistically, the Environment 2.0 within human lifetime. We are apparently responsible for one of the biggest extinctions of species around the world, and there's whether climate change and all kinds of things happening, all of which impact the way we do business and what we do. So there's a few interesting directions that we could take the whole discussion in, and let me just list a few of those directions. The first direction is to talk about the purpose of business in itself. Just a couple of weeks ago, there were about 300 CEOs in the US who came out and said that creating shareholder value was no longer their responsibility. And that made me think. And to my delight and surprise, The Economist followed last week with an editorial that said, watch out, because when you don't create shareholder value, you often don't create any value for society, and you are not responsible to anybody. But it's an interesting discussion. What is the purpose of business? What's the role of governments in this purpose of business? And what's the role of governance? And and given especially all the recent alarms on Environment 2.0, and the increasing disparity of wealth between rich and poor in almost every society, given the digital divide. These are interesting concepts to discuss, and to what extent has sustainable value creation, in fact, been an essential part of wealth creation and lifting people out of poverty in the last so many years. That's one angle we could take. The second whole topic of discussion is to do with the rise of artificial intelligence, the rise of artificial general intelligence, if that ever happens, the Internet of Things, and the impact on job creation and job loss. Because if indeed AI and AGI and Internet of Things start to create new technologies that make jobs of today obsolete, then what are people going to do? What are the jobs of tomorrow? And when I ask this question to industry leaders, typically they say we don't know because they haven't been invented yet. So how do you educate people? How do you prepare people for the jobs of tomorrow that don't exist? Or can we already predict some jobs do, which will exist? And it's an interesting whole area of discussion. What's the responsibility of governments? What's the responsibility of industry? What's the responsibility of civil society in preparing people for this big disruption that is happening right now under our noses? Another entire new direction you could take is to talk about how we could use digital technologies to enhance governance, to enhance healthcare, to enhance education, and what are the implications even for government? Because when you really use digital technologies in a vast scale, maybe you don't need big government anymore. This is shock and horror, I know, for a lot of the people in the audience, but hey, things can happen. It's an interesting line of speculation and discussion. The other big area of discussion with the whole thing of technology and artificial intelligence is the whole challenge of globalization as an engine for growth versus the newfound fears of protectionism, how societies are in fact driving one or the other depending on where they sit with a 21st century perspective. And I saw the previous panel already talked about this issue at length, but nevertheless, maybe we can add a few interesting points of view from our panel as well. With it to capitalism, where does it go? Was Schumpeter right when he said capitalism will eventually collapse of its own accord, or does it still have life in it, and what is that, the nature of that life? And related to this, different parts of the world seem to be at different stages of development. Africa increasingly looks like the India of 30 years ago. So are we talking an industry 3.0 or 4.0 or 2.0 for them? Is it different horses for courses? Is it one size fits all? Are people going to leapfrog? What does it mean for India? What does it mean for the other economies? What does it mean? And there's a fundamental demographic change that nobody talks about, which is aging societies. That is huge. China today, and people don't realize this, China has 300 million people above the age of 60 who are retired. That is incredible. India is not far behind. We're also aging. I'm part of the first generation born in a free India. I'm above 60 years of age. Yeah, so I'm the different generation. And how is that going to transform societies? All fascinating directions, and we're going to explore a few of these in our discussions today. So to start off, I'm going to invite Joel Reifman, and I'm going to invite each of the participants on the panel to speak for about 3 to 4 minutes with their point of view, and then we'll start to ask questions and we'll have some interaction and eventually with the audience as well. Let me start by asking Joel Reifman. Joel, could you enlighten us with some points of view?
Thank you. Again, I'm Joel Reifman, and I'm privileged to be here today. I want to thank the Ministry of External Affairs and ISB, and it is really my honor to support the relationship between the United States and India in the states of Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, and Odisha. And so I have probably the least expertise here from anyone on the stage, but also a personal as far as technology and trade, because I joined the Foreign Service 25 years ago. And I know I'm old when new officers who are working with me in the consulate are young enough to be my children. So we really what we really see is the promotion of, as I see it, the relationship between the United States and India. And so I'm thrilled to be in India. I've served in both Pakistan and Bangladesh, and here, this relationship could very well be the defining bilateral relationship of the 21st century. And I'm thrilled to be in Hyderabad, and because Hyderabad is an exemplar of what especially good investment policies are and a window onto good trade policies. Trade and technology are interrelated. And I'm very proud that the United States has been on the vanguard of that everywhere from the cotton gin to the iPhone. But right now, and I've seen it in myself, we are undergoing an age of unprecedented change. And where are we going to end up? You had mentioned artificial intelligence. I'm no expert in it. I know there was a very interesting debate between Jack Ma and also the head of SpaceX, Elon Musk. And so we, is it going to be something scary out of the Skynet, out of the movie Terminator, or is it going to be something that we can control? What's it going to do with jobs? And what I would say is that the changes that we have, first of all, data. Right now, data flows account for $2.8 trillion of global GDP. And so now cross-border data flows generate more value than traditional flows of traded goods. And so therefore, the world economy is predicated on the ability to move data easily across borders without impediment. And new technologies such as 3D printing means that, again, data is accentuated because even if there is a tangible product at the end of that pipeline, it goes through data flows. So this change is underway, and we have to adapt, and we have to manage that change. And so part of that comes in the form of our bilateral relationship, because we have further cooperation in trade and investments under the principles of openness, competition, and reciprocity. And so some of that, some of the issues my government is interested in is we're very proud that our trade with India has grown from $20 billion in 2001 to $142 billion in 2018. That is a 7-fold increase in trade. Investment flows have similarly increased during that period, I understand, about 6 times. However, we have a $24 billion trade deficit, and our average wave of tariffs in the United States, our average tariffs rather, are 3.4% versus India's at 13.8%. And so basically what we're looking for, again, in an Indo-Pacific region is a way to intensify cooperation with India to have a fair, open, and transparent entire Indo-Pacific region. And some of that I see with, Jayesh and Telangana State, in that for the investment environment here, Jayesh has done a brilliant job, and Telangana has done a brilliant job in, first of all, minimizing opportunities for rent seeking, and also developing a process of approvals that fast tracks it, that is extremely efficient. And so when you look around you today, you see Google and Amazon and Microsoft and all of a plethora of US corporations investing. And so that, as in the prior panel, the Australian High Commissioner spoke of that, there is that investment component, and there is the trade component, because free, fair, reciprocal trade really it helps for governance, it helps for global security, and it helps, it really helps our prosperity of the entire region. And a lot of these are kind of buzzwords, but having governments throughout the region that A, don't mess up trade and investment, and B, that promotes an open regime as opposed to a closed regime, of trade and investment. And why? Because that grows the pie. It doesn't slice up an existing pie. It says our economies are going to grow, and what our goal is to grow those economies together, to stay focused on our shared economic vision and level playing field. So I know the clock is ticking, so I'd like to say just a few things that I'm very proud of this institution and the involvement of American, Northwestern and University, and also Fletcher School, University of Pennsylvania, and also just a list that shows the potential of U.S. economic-India cooperation from another perspective. I want to list the names of a few very prominent Americans who head global corporations. We'll start with Indra Nooyi, who was the former chairman of Pepsi, Santanu Narayan, who's the chairman and CEO of Adobe, Sanjay Mehrotra, president and CEO of Micron Technology, Vivek Sandrakhan, president and CEO of Albertsons, Sundar Pichai, who was CEO of Google, and of course a native son of Hyderabad, Satya Nadella, who is the CEO of Microsoft. And so I'm very proud because, thank you, because it exemplifies our shared values, and I'm very proud of the United States. I'll be a little bit of tooting my horn because this kind of openness provides opportunities for everyone of all classes, colors, and religions, and that's what we are seeking in the Indo-Pacific. So thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Joel. May I invite Jayesh Ranjan to share with us your perspectives?
Sure. So, Nandu, I'll pick a point which was alluded to repeatedly by the earlier panel, also mentioned briefly by Joel, which is about the importance of investments. I mean, everyone spoke about getting global investments, international investments. There should not be barriers to those investments, but the prime reason which was advanced to seek investments is basically economic growth, jobs, etc. But in the context of the topic that we are discussing, that is Industry 4.0, I have actually seen live examples here in Hyderabad of international investments coming and actually promoting new generation technologies, new ways of doing things, new management practices, etc., which eventually permeate in the system and also benefit the Indian counterparts, the Indian industry. So that is again a very important value for which we must encourage and welcome global investments. Industry 4.0, as you spoke about, even I am baffled by Society 5.0. I think our society will perpetually remain at 1.0. I don't know that we have made five-fold progress. But nevertheless, for Industry 4.0, it is again very important and we are seeing results. So Industry 4.0 is no more just a slogan or an aspirational kind of thing. I have seen here in Hyderabad, many companies have converted their manufacturing practices into Industry 4.0. Just to give a real example, Schneider has a 20-year-old manufacturing facility. They make electrical components, switchboards and stuff like that here in Hyderabad. Roughly about a year ago, they converted that factory into an Industry 4.0 compliant factory. And the day they had launched that newer version of their factory, I was also present. And it was amazing to see the kind of process changes and transformations which have happened. Just to give one small example, but something which has a huge implication. Now in that factory, every unit of energy that is consumed in their manufacturing process is monitored and benchmarked against multiple parameters. So for example, they benchmark against what has been the average of that industry in the last 1 week, last 1 month, last 1 year, how similar placed industries consume electricity. And suppose at any point of time, if it is found that they are consuming more electricity or energy as compared to the benchmark, there is an automatic process shutdown. So for example, if this is your factory and the alarm tells you that you are now consuming above the industry norms, maybe those lights will be switched off automatically. If you cross somewhere more, those lights also will go off automatically, and so on and so forth. So it's really amazing to see how application of technologies is helping them become energy efficient, Obviously that using optimal resources for their manufacturing processes, good for the planet, good for the society, and obviously very good for their bottom line as well. If you look at digital companies, Joel gave example of Microsoft, Google, etc. All of them today from Hyderabad, right, let us say within a radius of 2-3 kilometers from here, are creating amazing products. You spoke about the importance of technology in changing the way governance is carried out, the way it can create social impact in important areas of health and livelihoods and education, etc. I'll again give an example from Microsoft. Microsoft, see, many of you would be familiar, those who live in Hyderabad will know that there is an amazing eye care institution in Hyderabad called the LV Prasad Eye Institute. And LV Prasad Eye Institute is in existence for the last 4 decades or so. And they would have examined hundreds and thousands of children, lots of young children have who report of some eye ailment have gone there, their diagnosis has been done. One amazing thing about LV Prasad Institute is that they have maintained all those records very meticulously. And a few years ago, all those records were handed over to Microsoft. Microsoft has now created a tool, a predictive analytical tool. So if a new child is gone through diagnostic tests, this tool, if it is run through, this tool is called Mine. Mine can predict with practically 100% accuracy what kind of eye ailments can that child develop in future. And what we did here in Telangana was to get all the school children who study in government schools, go through eye checks. Mine was run, and it was found, you won't believe this, that almost 80,000 children could have become could have grown older with severe eye problems, including complete loss of sight. And obviously, when this detection was made at a very young age for those children, corrective action was done, surgeries were performed, and potentially we have saved 80,000 kids, their families, and you can imagine, from becoming burdens on the society, they are going to continue to become productive adults, and they will contribute to the society's well-being and so on and so forth. So all this, I'm not implying to say that this can only be done by Microsoft. Indian companies can't do. But the fact is that lots of international companies who have presence in Hyderabad, in Telangana, in India, do bring some very cutting edge, some very transformative kind of manufacturing processes, technologies, etc., which will further the interests of the entire society at large.
Thank you, Jayesh. That was very instructive and very inspirational, what you're doing. May I pass the floor over to Suresh and ask you for your points of view as well as your build on what Joel and Jayesh said.
Thank you, Nandu. I'm wearing 2 hats, one as the Honorary Consul General of Korea and as Chairman Emeritus of Phoenix Group. So I would have 2 different viewpoints, if I may. The first viewpoint is, when I take up from what you said about the 300 CEOs of the world CEOs saying, I don't bother about the stakeholders' value, shareholders' value, and I'm only interested in social enterprise. I wouldn't agree with that, because as business people, if you don't look at your shareholders' value, why would any investor invest in your company? If you want to really look at social enterprise, you make profits and spend the money to the social enterprise. What I've seen in majority of these countries is that the CEOs would like to get millions of dollars as salaries and perks and first-class tickets, but would not like their shareholders to get dividends, which I feel is not acceptable with any investor. The purpose of business is what? The purpose of business is to create wealth for the nation. And if you want to create wealth for the nation, you need to do business, you need to have money, and you need to have shareholders to invest into your enterprise. So we need to clearly understand that what some CEOs talk is not the word of the entire world. When we look at Indian business perspective, we have 2 kinds of businesses in India, not relating to the foreign investment or foreign multinational companies getting into India. We are talking about the public sector and private sector. And typically in India, other than the public sector, the majority of the private sector are family-owned businesses. And family-owned businesses have really successfully improved the shareholders' value and given so much wealth to this nation, so much job creation. You talk about the Ambanis, you talk about the Birlas or Adanis, or you talk about any company, including Jai. He created value for about 8,000 or 10,000 employees. So unless he gives back to the shareholders, why would anyone want to invest with him? So that is one topic what is very interesting. The rich and poor divide. Yes, I agree there is a rich and poor divide in this country, and it is there everywhere in the world, including US, including China, and every other country. But today, even the poor, if they really want to work hard, there is no limits or no boundaries for them. So it is the passion for them to work. But as long as we continue to give the freebies to the poor, the below poverty or the white card owners, so they would not like to work. And today we are facing a major problem in having employment. The grassroots level employees are not available. And I would also say that we need to get into disruptive job creation, which are not the regular jobs. So we are now looking at a lot of new intelligent startups by youngsters who are coming out with brilliance of ideas, and new jobs are getting created. And in fact, I would appeal to the ISB students that they should, instead of getting into their cushy air-conditioned jobs, they should come out with interesting ideas where Government of India is willing to give money, 1 crore without any security or something. Within 1 hour, Government of India is giving. So creation of wealth will happen with creation of jobs, getting new and new ideas. Artificial intelligence, robotics will not disrupt our jobs. For example, I'll tell you, when I talk about Kia Motors in Andhra Pradesh, I have seen about 700 robots working in that company. And I thought, there is no job creation in this company because there are so many robots and everything is automated. But for your information, they have created 8,000 jobs in 1 year time in an area where there is nothing earlier. It's like a deserted area in Anantapur. Today, 8,000 to 10,000 jobs were created. Young engineers, young people are there. And because of the 8,000 jobs, there is so much of economy going on in that area. So I think we need not worry about job creation for our poor or for our youngsters. So there are a lot of opportunities available. And new technologies are coming in, and the population of 1.3 billion is what we have, where anything you produce or anything you do is consumed in the country. So you need not worry about anything. We are going to be positive in the way we are leading, and Government of India is leading a very positive way of bringing together banks, merging the banks, and they are taking a lot of new steps which are going towards improving our nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Suresh.
Thank you, Suresh. I couldn't agree with you more about the purpose of business, which is indeed value creation on a sustainable basis over time. So with this, let me invite here Ajay to come in with a few different points of view on what different governments are doing differently in this challenge.
Thank you, Nandu. I will take from where Nandu left about Industry 4.0. Its definition is about networking of horizontal and vertical networking of human and machine. Just note that human is part of the network once you have this. But just let's see what is Industry 1.0 and 2.0. And why it is a fundamental jump. This industry 4.0 is a fundamental jump. Here, until now, where human has been controlling the system, industry 4.0, human will be part of that longer chain when it fully evolves. I am not saying it is negative or positive, but it is an inevitable scenario. And what are the benefits? Benefits are, as just sir mentioned, it's zero wastage of energy and resources, and you have flawless products. And obviously, since there is a zero wastage, you have maybe far cheaper products. So as we are all going to get excited about Industry 4.0, but just hold on a while. Let's have a long-term view on this. See, just think from transition from Industry 1 to Industry 2, where only difference it made was that invention of assembly line, product assembly line. And that gave such a huge advantage to those who started early. Most of the countries in the world even remain at Industry 1.0. Have you ever thought how many countries in the world are manufacturing cars? So when I ask this question, okay, we have answer. Okay, only those who are competitive in the market should make the car, rest should not make the cars. Yes, agree. But let's think deeper on that. So, and then it comes to Industry 3, networking of digital economy, integration of digital and mechanical, the kind of huge advantage. Further, that gap between Industry 1 and Industry 3, or the technological haves and technological have-nots, increase so widely. In this context only, we are looking at Industry 4.0. Now, I briefly explained what is Industry 4.0, and let's see why. Certainly, certain countries are ahead, despite the fact that it required such a huge investment. Countries are going. What countries like India can do is we can have a showcase factories here and smart factories here and there, and we can show we also have Industry 4. But actually, who are going to take lead? All the countries, those who have reached their post-demographic stage, where population is shrinking and hands for working is getting reduced and labor is going up, they inevitably have to move to Industry 4. We also at some stage will have to move, but whether we should advance or what, that's a thing that I am not saying any opinion whether to go or not, but I am just leaving some questions to you. So this is the scenario. Now what is in store for us? See, we all get excited about the job creation and all that. Many people are, the computer didn't create job. Yes, computer created job. We should not compare the job created by computer with the era before computer. Our comparison parameter should be whether we achieved what we could have achieved. Have the manufacturing of computer, India is one of the largest market of computer, and if you see search Google, which are the major manufacturer of computer, we are not in first 15. So, and what kind of job computer created? If you, any city, if you go to that computer service market, other than I am not talking about a few software engineers and few lucky ones. If you go there, in that small area in a 5x feet shop, 5 people, 6 people sit, they do low-end maintenance job. That is the job mostly in computer created in India. To use economics word, that disguised employment moved from agriculture to urban area. How many actually are they earning more than what they would have earned in village? I am not sure. That is another question to ask. So now anyway, after having said all these things, we cannot stop this. It is inevitable. It is coming. So what should we do? As I said, this investment, huge investment required, and obviously the countries doing that huge investment are shrinking markets, so they would look at the other market aggressively. So what we should do? Should we have a new framework? Whether WTO would be able to handle that situation? These are the scenarios we have to face, not immediately, after 10, 15 years. So whether we should look into then I will say that protectionism kind of things, it is looked down upon now. Earlier it was one of the ideology, now it is looked down upon. It keeps in economics, things happen in cycles, so we don't know. A new protectionism will come when Industry 4.0 comes. We don't know. But fact remains that whatever we talk about, excited about technology and all things, Industry 4.0 is not coming to Africa very soon, or many other places. What will happen to those places? This is also we have to see. So whether world should look at a new framework whenever it comes. As of now, Industry 4.0 is only a couple of smart factories, but when it actually comes, whether we should look at a new framework or new idea how to deal with this is one question I want to throw at. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ajay, for those very insightful comments and also developments on what we are already doing as a country. May I, to close this particular phase of the panel discussion, may I then invite you, Jaydev, to give us a bigger perspective and picture of where we are going.
Right. Thank you, Nandu. I think for me, when I looked at this topic of Industry 4.0 and Society 5.0, I think what we also need to keep in mind is what phase of globalization are we in today. I mean, I don't know if it's 4.0, 5.0, or 6.0, but it started with the discovery of the new world and the old world, and also then moved into a period of colonialism, and then decolonialism, and then the Cold War, and then the latest phase of a lot of expansion in terms of trade and movement of people, movement of goods, movement of ideas. All of that was happening very well for the last couple of decades, I guess. But now we're looking at a, I don't know if it's called, what you want to call it, a post-globalization phase, or maybe a backlash to the globalization. Because there were winners and losers during this phase, and the people who lost really weren't taken care of in most of the countries. And that's what you see as the backlash against globalization, moving into more of a protectionist, nationalist, more of nationalism, protectionism, that type of a scenario. And also because of security-related issues with terrorism on the rise, people are starting to become more protectionist for that reason as well. So this is the kind of thing that's happening while we're looking at Industry 4.0 emerging and what's that going to do to society. When we look at the Indian context, it's again a very peculiar situation. It's not like the rest of the world. In our country, 70% of the people live in the rural areas. 60 to 65% are dependent on agriculture income, which is less than 20% of our GDP. So we've had the need for a long time to do something akin to what China did, where they shifted almost 300, 400 million people out of agriculture-based income into manufacturing and services. Now, can we repeat that? Probably not. Not because of anything else other than that time period, that window is over. Manufacturing as a provider of large number of low-skilled jobs is disappearing. We are in a I run a group of manufacturing businesses, and we see as we're expanding, we're not expanding headcount at the same rate. I mean, it's happening even in India, where the capital versus labor equation is very different in favor of labor many times in India, but that's changing even in India today. So where are we headed? Where are we headed with all of this? What do we do with all these people is really the question. And one way to look at it is we're not far behind the rest of the world in that sense, because these are new trends that are every nation is confronted with, whether it's agriculture jobs needing to be, people moving from agriculture to something else, or whether it's people moving from manufacturing to something else, they have the same challenges. The education systems are not geared up. We don't know what the future looks like. We don't know how to educate and train our young people to be prepared for that future. But one thing, Jim, you mentioned the conversation between Elon Musk and Jack Ma the other day, and it's very interesting to see, the mindsets of a Chinese entrepreneur and, currently more of an American entrepreneur, I guess, nationality being aside. But these are, challenges that the developing world, the emerging world is facing versus the developed world is facing was very apparent in that dialogue. And I think that we are looking at one thing that everybody, that they both agreed on is that, population explosion was a major concern for us for so many years. But now we're looking at the opposite challenge of not having enough population growth in countries like China and the developed world, where it's leading to inversion of the pyramid, it's leading to non-replacement rate of the population and many other problems that we may be facing. So it's not just population explosion that's a problem, but even a reduction of population that's also going to be a problem. And with all of that, people are going to be working less. They're saying people are going to be working 3 days a week, 4 hours a day, 12-hour work day, because everything's going to be automated. All the basic jobs that don't require a lot of intellectual capability are going to be the first to go. But then we're seeing with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and everything else, even the capability of machines is increasing dramatically to a point where, how much can they replace knowledge workers and creative workers in the future is also looking like a real possibility. So what does the future look like in a post-labor society, in a post-global society, or a it's nice to think about, but I think that the idea of a job, working for a firm for a period of time at set hours and being judged on certain outputs, maybe think of the past as we evolve into this new society, and we're going to all become entrepreneurs someday, I think, and whether we're managing capital, or we're managing machines, or whatever it may be, it's going to be a very different world. And I think that's what we, as Indians and as a country in India, we need to recognize we're not far behind the rest of the world in understanding how to cope for the future, because the future is changing very rapidly. But how do we leapfrog and get there first?
Thank you. Thanks, Jaidev. That was very deep and very insightful. And indeed, shortly before he died, about 15 years ago, Peter Drucker, the management guru of the 20th century, wrote an article, a very nice article in The Economist, where he talked about a new reality. And he was predicting Industry 4.0. And he talked about the vision of Karl Marx achieved with the power of Bill Gates, where you are competing in a globalized playing field where every individual competes on his or her personal merits. So it's a fascinating, brave new world that we are entering. And indeed, I liked very much the reference Jaidev made also to the importance of education as a national agenda. Some of the countries that have in fact responded to, Ajay, to your point, to Industry 4.0 very well, like Singapore, whether Korea or others, are in fact investing great sums of money in education, in building those skills and capabilities that will prepare their citizens for the Industry 4.0, even not knowing the specific technologies that will be available then, but the skills that are going. So very, very interesting developments indeed. And you've heard the panel, you've had some very interesting points of view and very inspirational and thought-provoking points of view here. I have just been handed a note requesting us to wrap up in the next 10 minutes. So instead of opening questions from the panelists to each other, we had actually quite an interesting discussion even before we got here. But allow me to open the floor to questions from the audience. I believe there are 4 mics, and I need to stand up because the lights are too much of a glare. Oops, that's even worse. The person in the center in the specs, can you stand up, please? Yep, thank you. And just introduce yourself, first name only, and a brief question. And we'll answer the question, and then we'll move to the next.
Okay, so this is Anurag from University of Hyderabad. So let me make my question clear. So when we are talking about technology and trade in the context of changing world patterns and new disruptions in the present economy, how come the rising idea of apolitical money such as cryptocurrency and especially bitcoins can be, as a modem of trade between countries, can be an opportunity or a challenge for countries, especially India?
Thank you, Anurag. Cryptocurrency as a challenge or an opportunity. Does anyone want to go for that?
I wouldn't think cryptocurrency will succeed in any country for that matter, and it will be a bubble, and it will actually disrupt the world. So please, as a youngster, don't even look at it. Look at ordinary currency. Thank you.
Is that direct enough for you, Anurag? But I'm open to opposing points of view from the panel if there are.
See, my thought would be that cryptocurrency is still evolving. There are lots of people who are extremely bullish about it. They feel that that is going to replace other forms of transactions. But at the same time, very, very experienced people who have immense amount of domain expertise feel that it is a bubble which is going to burst. So we need to, our government, the national government and the state government is very rightfully cautious. But at the same time, I'm sure you know this, that the technology which powers cryptocurrency, which is blockchain, that is being embraced left, right and center in our country. Telangana itself is a shining example of at least more than a dozen blockchain use cases. So my kind of caveat would be that it is too early to judge cryptocurrency. Let us wait and watch for some more time.
That's an excellent, excellent bill. Thank you, Jay. There was a question here. Yes, could you stand up, please? Yeah. And wait for the mic. There should be a mic reaching you soon. And just first name and a brief question. Thank you.
My name is Uday Wagre, and this is directed to Suresh. If we assume the basic premise of any business is to create value and give back to the nation, is it not incumbent on the government to do away with protectionism in form of reservations and let merit be the pure catalyst so that we have this extrapolation of merit and the freedom to express themselves and then contribute to self as well as to the nation?
I think you have a contradictory question within the question. One, you're talking about creating wealth by business, and the other way you're talking about protectionism and reservation.
I'm doing away with protection.
Yeah. We are 1.3 billion people, and in our dreams, and maybe in our grandchildren's dreams also, we cannot live away with protectionism. It is something which has come, and it will probably remain for some more time. The government has to have the will to do something about it. People are talking about it, and we don't know when it will happen. Let us not worry too much about that, because there are many ways where a hardworking, good student or good entrepreneur can always come over the gender balance or the blockade of these reservations or the protectionism. I would definitely want to say that we have seen protectionism in a different way. For example, there are a lot of foreign direct investments which are coming into this country, not only FDIs, but within the country, a lot of large entrepreneurs who have built large empires like Jay and others. What I feel is protectionism in terms of labor laws. The laws are extremely good. Government is extremely cautious on the laws. But what is happening is the local leaders, they create all the havoc. If you are a good, honest, sincere worker, no one would remove you. But if you create some kind of nuisance in the organization and someone removes you, then the entire ecosystem gets disrupted because of, one, egos of the labor union and the management. Two, because of the protectionism, the local MLA or the local parliamentarian or the Communist Party or someone will go and start doing the strikes. It is within their rights to do whatever they want, but end of the day, what is going to happen is the economy is going to collapse. The wealth is going to be destroyed. An industry which is performing extremely well, and when you remove two people from there because of their non-performance or of their disruptive behavior, when people go in for agitation, put up a tent and start obstructing people from going into the industry or beating up the management, in 3 months' time, if the industry limps, immediately the banks will come and say this industry has become NPA. And with that, the erosion of wealth happens. And with that, the erosion of banks' wealth happens. And the employment of the rest of the 1,000 people also goes. So protectionism is something which is a very, very thorough discussion point. Political will has to be there. Politicians have to come out of their protection mentality of these. No, not the reservations. Reservations are okay. But the employee protection is something which is disrupting the entire industry. And foreign direct investment, they are worried about this. Yeah. I'll take example of Maruti and many other companies which face these threats.
Thank you, Suresh. What Suresh is saying indeed is to balance employee protection with industry protection of some sort. And the other message which I replay what he said earlier in context of value creation is inviting our young people to look at entrepreneurial opportunities rather than focusing on jobs, because indeed the technologies of the future. Joel, a quick word, and then I have one last question from Shravya.
Message. It is the power of partnership over protectionism. We face global problems such as replacement of labor by machines, such as management of consumption of public goods like clean air. We co-hosted in Hyderabad here in 2017 the Global Entrepreneur Summit, which we think inspired a generation of global entrepreneurs. And industries are not static. They grow, they die, and with entrepreneurship and with enduring resilient partnerships, we can generate that wealth.
Thank you, Joel. Allow me then to move to our last question from Shravya right here in the front row.
Hi, I'm Shravya again. So my question is, while we're talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning, sort of replacing knowledge and intellectual capabilities, how do you think it affects policies, and therefore, how do you think it solves problems and larger problems, and what kind of impact do you think would it have in the government sector especially?
Yes. If I've understood you correctly, you're asking how will these changes affect policy? And, okay. Well, if we look at, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all of these technologies, robotics, 3D printing, and so on, that's coming into the manufacturing space today, and also into some service industries as well. It's all about increasing efficiency. I mean, why are we bringing in these technologies? To improve quality, to improve throughput, to improve the business and the cost of doing that business. So if industry realizes that that's the way to go in order to bring those type of benefits, then labor is going to be a casualty in that process. So how do we actually account for that. I mean, when I spoke in the beginning, I said that, you know, the latest phase of globalization is facing backlash because the people who are out of work, who suffered as a consequence of the globalization, were not being adequately taken care of. So I think that's where policy public policy, government has to step in, identify who are the people who are being affected by this, and have some kind of a way to, first of all, retrain them, repurpose them, get them into the economy again in a manner that they can fend for themselves and have a livelihood. And also to look at policies that are more future, looking towards the future about how do you train youngsters coming out, coming into, who are going to be coming out of colleges and out of schools in the future, maybe in less than a decade or around a decade's time, and how are they going to be prepared to fend for themselves and earn their livelihood. And by earning livelihood, I don't necessarily mean job. I mean, job may be a thing of the past. We don't know yet. But how do you bring in, maybe we have to, the time may be right for us to look at the idea of universal basic income. That's been debated around the world a lot, and especially countries with a large number of underemployed people like India, it could be something that we have to start testing. But universal basic income means, what does that mean? It could be a combination of both cash and also facilities provided by the government. It could be public transportation, it could be housing, it could be the basic needs that anybody requires to live is now become the responsibility of the society as a whole through the government, right? But then if anybody wants to go live a lifestyle beyond that, they would have to learn how to earn in order to pay for that. So I don't know if I've answered your question, Shravya, but I think that's...
But thanks, Nish. It is indeed a discussion and an issue for which there are no easy answers. It's answers which we will have to evolve as government, as society, as industry, as we go forward. Yes, please, one last point.
Yeah, if I could just add, when we talk about this 12-hour work week concept, that means that a lot of people are going to have a lot of time on their hands for leisure, for entertainment, for sports, for, learning new, painting or cycling, or it could be a host of different things which, with the demand increasing for that because the disposable time that they have, today if you have 2 days a week to do that, tomorrow you're going to have 4 days or 5 days a week to do that, which means the demand is going to increase and a whole new host of industries are going to emerge to cater to those needs.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
With that, allow me to quickly, before I hand over to you, allow me to quickly say a word of thanks to our distinguished panelists. Fabulous discussion, great views, and I hand over to you.
Thank you. I request Professor Nandu Nandkishore, Associate Dean, Indian School of Business, to please come onto the stage and hand over mementos to the speakers as a token of our gratitude. First to the chair, Professor Nandu. Mr. Suresh Chukkapalli. Jaydev Gala. Consul General Joel Rickman. Shri Jayesh Ranjan, and Shri Ajay Kumar. Quick announcement.